Welcome back to the Andrew and Ian Show. I'm Andrew Serwick here again with Ian. Hi, Ian. We are 9 days away from watching college football again. How you doing this evening, man?
Yeah, 9 days. That's a real good feeling.
A great feeling. I am ready for college football, even though it's a shell of its former self when it comes to regionality and shit. But let's get into this episode today, man. We're just gonna go through the ACC and kind of preview the ACC for you, along with Notre Dame because they do play 5 games against ACC schools that kind of have a deal with the ACC in terms of the media shit. So we're gonna include them here at the end of this conference. But let's start here with Boston College. We're gonna go alphabetical, of course, as we have in the last 2 episodes now. Boston College, um, they're they're not really known to be a great football program. Obviously, um, their schedule this year is fairly good, but the ACC in general is just not good. So like, as a whole, it's not very. There's not a lot of strong teams in it this year, and I believe there's only 3 teams from the ACC that are ranked this year. And so going through this, it's going to be very, very interesting to see just how the ACC shakes out this year. But week one, well, actually, this is week two, but they will play. No, this is week one. They play Florida State, and the schedule this year for them is it's tough at times. They have Missouri on their schedule at some point, and Louisville I think is going to be pretty good this year as well. So I can see realistically Boston going around 8 wins, 7 wins. I don't know exactly what their win total is. I don't have that pulled up. But I can see just looking at the schedule right now about 8, 9 wins probably at the very, very most. I mean, they're not going to beat Missouri, and they're not going to beat Florida State, but they could beat Louisville, but I think Louisville is going to be really good this year. So, but outside of that, their schedule is not that great. So, Boston College could have a very nice record at the end of the year. I think they'll definitely be bowl eligible, though.
Looking at it, yeah, I feel like I see at least two definite losses. A couple toss-up games there with Michigan State and Louisville, just because I feel like Michigan State is going to be better, like we went over when we went and did the Big Ten. Because I think we did end up giving Michigan State this one, but regardless, like I said with Louisville, like you said with Louisville as well, I think it is a toss-up there. I also feel like with the ACC, they have this whole gauntlet of ACC teams at the end of this. They're just going to tear each other apart, so I wouldn't be shocked to see them, beat Virginia, lose to Virginia Tech, beat Louisville, lose to Syracuse, beat SMU, lose to North Carolina, beat Pitt, something like that. And just have all of these ACC teams tear themselves apart internally, like we always do.
Yeah, it could very well go that way. I just pulled up the win total. They got Boston. FanDuel has Boston College at 4.5 wins for that. So that tells you what they think of Boston College. And I don't pay a lot of attention to the ACC because out of the now Power Four conferences, it's the weakest, and it always has been the weakest of when we had the Pac-12 was the weakest of the Power Five conferences, and it still is. So with FanDuel, I don't really know with Boston College. I don't really pay much attention to them, especially. I mean, there's very few teams in the ACC that are actually noteworthy. So yeah. So moving on here to Cal. Speaking of this, they are a new addition to the ACC, but nothing says Atlantic Coast like California. Um, but yeah, they have their win total here at 6.5. Cal's just been one of those teams over the last few years, in the Pac-12 especially, just getting beat up on. They've always kind of been just a mid-level team. They've never been good for at least a very long time. So, yeah, I could see them getting around 6 or 7 wins here, and that's really just about it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, looking at the schedule, I see about 5 wins where I'm like, yeah, they're probably losing this game. Like looking at second game of the season, they have Auburn. at Auburn. Yeah, that's a loss. They play Florida State. They play Miami. They play NC State. Florida State, Miami, and NC State are all ranked right now.
Right, and that's the
It's
thing, and
tough.
it is a tough schedule, and also too, I mean, you know, and we'll get to this later because I have a sleeper team in this to win this conference this year, or at least to compete maybe for the conference, and we'll get to it when we get there. But yeah, just not a you know not a favorable schedule, but not like a difficult schedule here for Cal either, and I can see him floating right around that 6-win mark. Uh, so moving on, we got Clemson. Their win totals at 8.5 this year, and I had them pegged before the rankings even came out. 9 wins, and now looking at this win total, I might just be correct right on that. I think they could make the playoffs, and I think we talked about it on Tuesday, saying that they're kind of just that bubble team that's going to be right there. If they get in, they'll probably be an 11 or a 12, but yeah, 8.5 wins. Looking at the schedule and looking at just the talent level on that team as well. Right now, they're not as good as they were when they had Trevor Lawrence. And they have to start off the year with Georgia, so that's going to be tough. And then they also play NC State later on in the season, and Florida State as well. So like I said, I got them pegged for 9 wins. I could see 10, but I don't see them going anything less than 8 wins this year.
And so yeah, barring a massive like shitting the bed from this team and the coaching staff, I feel like 8 is a good floor for them, and 9 is probably a reasonable win.
Yeah, I mean, they play App State at one point. They play Stanford, who's garbage. Wake Forest is ass. Virginia Tech is nowhere near as good as they used to be. Pitt is ass, and then South Carolina is also ass. So I mean, Clemson has a favorable schedule towards the end of the season. Just the start of the season, they have a gauntlet between Georgia, NC State, Florida State, and what was I looking at? Oh yeah, just those 3 teams then. Um, you know, you play those 3 teams in your first 5 weeks of the season. That I mean, we could be looking at a 2-3 Clemson team come the start of week 6 too. So I mean, it's gonna be it's gonna be a tough year for Clemson for sure. So moving on here down to Duke. They have their win total set at 5.5 here. If I'm the betting man, I'm taking that over. I think Duke is going to sit right around 6-6, maybe 7-5. I feel like they could pull off some crazy upsets. I mean, the only 2 good teams that are on their schedule is Florida State and Miami. They do play NC State, so never mind on that. But they play a bunch of garbage teams to start the year, like Elon, Northwestern, and UConn, and then Middle Tennessee State as well. I mean, that's 4 wins right there, I think. I mean, Northwestern might give them a run for their money, but yeah, just Duke, easy schedule throughout. I mean, even North Carolina's not nearly as good. Even last year they were garbage, and they had Drake May. So this year it's going to be even worse for North Carolina. And so I feel like, yeah, I could see this over hitting for Duke here.
All right, so yeah, like you said, they start off their schedule with the gauntlet of mid with those few teams. So that there, I feel like they can get themselves 4 wins already, and after that, they can definitely squeeze out 2 wins out of the last 8 games to get bowl eligibility. So I'm definitely betting that over.
Yeah, I mean, plain and simple, easy schedule to really start the year. You got 4 teams that are very easily beatable. Like I said, Northwestern might give them a run for their money, but Northwestern's going to be pretty shit this year. So I mean, that really is a toss-up game. But if you win that, yeah, you start off the season 4-0. You can easily get yourself bowl eligible from there. So yeah. So moving on here to Florida State, their win total, they have them set at 9.5. I'm hammering that over. Florida State's got a pretty nice schedule here. It's not too difficult, but it's not, uh, you know, or easy. Or it's not too difficult, but it's not too easy either. They have to play Notre Dame late in the season. They play Miami. They play Clemson. But outside of that, they play a whole bunch of garbage teams within their conference, and it's going to be very, very fun. And then they play Florida later on in the last week of the season, and I mean Florida's going to be not good, but yeah, I think Florida State is primed to win this conference. I see at the bare minimum 10 wins here. They could get upset by Miami and they could lose to Notre Dame and maybe also lose to Clemson, but I see them winning one of those three games.
Yeah, I feel like this team is going to be, kind of salty from last year. They were discounted, from the playoffs, and granted, they had a lot of injuries, and then players refused to play. But, this team, they want it, right? They want to prove that they were all that they, put on last year. Granted, they lost some players, but like you said, I feel like they do steal one of these games against either Clemson, Miami. I feel like Notre Dame's a little more iffy, but I feel like we'll get into that later once we, go over Notre Dame's schedule, and that's just a momentum thing because of how late it is in the season, and it's at Notre Dame.
Right, and that's the other thing too is I feel like the easiest win out of those three between Clemson, Notre Dame, and Miami. I feel like the easiest win there for Florida State would be against Miami. And that's just my own bias. I do not like Miami. I think they're pretty overrated, and Mario Cristobal is a fucking dumbass. So, yeah, I mean, it's gonna be a pretty solid year for Florida State, regardless. I mean, they're pretty much locked in, and you mentioned it too. Last year, they got left out of the playoffs, so they are coming back with a massive chip on their shoulder this year too. So I think that's gonna play into Florida State performing much better than expected this year. So yeah, moving on here now to Georgia Tech. They have their win total set here at 4.5. And that over is very heavily favored on FanDuel at minus 142. So just Georgia Tech is one of those teams where it's just like they're not really that good, but you can almost guarantee that they will put up a hell of a fight against Georgia at the end of the year. More than likely going to lose that game, but you already know, and we've seen it in years prior where Georgia Tech has been beating Georgia late in the game too, and just fall short. But they have a fairly favorable schedule for them as well, so that's why I think that that over is very heavily favored. They do play, obviously, Florida State, but they also play Notre Dame, Miami, and NC State, and obviously Georgia. So, those are 4 losses right away. Everything else is kind of a toss-up with Georgia Tech here. So I think that 4.5, you're going to hit that over at least. They'll probably be bowl eligible, but if not, it's going to be like a 5-7 season.
Yeah, like you said it. I think I see at least 5 losses with Florida State, Notre Dame, Miami, NC State, and Georgia. I feel like those are all pretty much solidified as losses. And at that point, you only need one more between Georgia State, Syracuse, VMI, Louisville, Duke, North Carolina, Virginia Tech. But I feel like out of those teams, Louisville's probably going to be the one
Yeah,
to give you a run for your money.
Louisville, I think, because Louisville, and we'll kind of merge these two teams together here because Louisville's over under for their win totals 8.5. So Louisville's going to be pretty solid this year too. So I think that could very well be a loss there. But everything else is kind of a toss up for Georgia Tech.
So yeah, even if you do lump in that Louisville as a loss, that's putting them at 6 losses, so they are still bowl eligible at that point. So it is a possibility.
Yeah, I mean 4.5. That's a tough, or 5.5. Yeah, no, 4.5. I mean, it's there. Vegas thinks they're going to win 5 games basically. So, yeah, but let's move on here then to Louisville. Yeah, that 8.5 win total. Reigning ACC champs. But the problem is that they lost quite a bit to the transfer portal this year, so they've kind of been depleted. But they aren't in a terrible state either as a program, but they aren't nearly as good as they were last year, and that's why I think their win total is sitting still at 8.5. And it was that last year too, so it's not like they've gotten better, but they haven't gotten worse either. So Vegas likes that under though on the 8.5, and yeah, I kind of like that too. I don't see them really going more than 8-4. It's possible for a 9-5 here with their schedule, but I just really don't see it happening. But they don't. The only tough teams that they really play are Clemson, Miami, and Notre Dame. So, um, you know, the only other tough game that they play is Kentucky, and that one's a toss-up right there. So that's where I think they could get that ninth win.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think Kentucky is that one game I'm looking at that they could get that ninth win, but I think I'm more comfortable sitting them at that 8 wins, and that's not hitting the over.
Right. I'm far more comfortable betting that under, but I wouldn't bet it because it's minus 162 odds. So I mean, you'd be losing money on that bet. But yeah, Louisville, it's definitely possible with Kentucky, and we even said during the SEC preview episode that's a toss up for Kentucky. And it's the same thing here for Louisville. It's a toss up game, so that's where I think they could hit their over, but. Yeah, I really don't see them going anything less than 8 wins though. I genuinely do not see more than 5 losses on that schedule. So moving on here to Miami, they have 9.5 wins as their over. And it's very interesting. I would hit that under personally, and the under is favored on that here on FanDuel. And that is very, very, very heavily favored at minus 170 on the under. Miami, I think, the one thing I think that's really, really holding Miami back is Mario Cristobal. He's such a fucking moron. I can't use the word I really want to use. But he he's so fucking stupid. And I mean, obviously last year when they lost the game because he decided to not take a knee with like 30 seconds to go on a first down. So
Lost him his job there.
Yeah, that should have cost.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Exactly, that was the most ridiculous coaching decision I've ever seen in my life, and that's where I think, yeah, they'll probably lose a game that they should have won because of him, and that's where I'm like, yeah, that under probably could hit for Miami, but they have talent to be a 9-10 win team this year. But again, when you have a complete moron running your team, you're probably going to lose a couple games that you shouldn't.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think at the end of this season, they're going to be looking back at probably the Duke and Louisville games and saying, these were 2 games we probably should have won, and we didn't. And what was the reason? And then they're going to be looking at their head coach like, what the fuck, bro?
Yeah, it's just yeah. Mario Cristobal, man. I do not like him. And I don't like him because he's just incompetent. Like he hasn't done anything bad except for just be a fucking incompetent football coach. So yeah. And so we're going to move on here, and this is the team that I said I think is a sleeper in the ACC, especially in the state that it's in with, Clemson on the decline and Florida State, while they're still good, they're not, that next level ahead. And I feel like NC State could very well be competitive this year in the ACC. Maybe make the playoffs if they make it at least to the ACC championship game. And they have their win total set here at 8.5. The over is favored on this, and I think looking at their program and over the last few years, it's been on the up and up, and that's a good sign. I kind of did a little bit of looking into them today, just to see why are they ranked, and they just have a very well-established program. Their head coach has been there for 10 years now, and all he's done is win. I mean, I think he's only had two losing seasons with that team, if I remember correctly. So yeah, and the schedule's pretty favorable for NC State as well. And that's why I think they can definitely hit that over on the 8.5, and potentially be in the ACC championship game this year.
Yeah, I see two games against teams that are currently ranked right now. So that's a possibility for 10 wins right there for them. And I mean, who knows? They could upset Clemson. They could beat Tennessee. I mean, granted, Tennessee is, you know, a different animal, but who knows? Like you said, they could be the one to challenge, Florida State, Miami, Clemson, whoever ends up being in the ACC title game, for that crown, and then further representing them in the playoffs, you know, as the higher seed of, represented teams, I guess. So I'm assuming we're going to have multiple ACC teams in with the extended playoffs.
Yeah, I think you're obviously going to get your ACC champion in the playoffs. That's a guaranteed, right?
Almost
Um,
all but guaranteed.
well, yeah, no, all the Power Four champions are locked in to the playoff. They get the top. They're all guaranteed a spot in the playoffs, and then like the best group of five team also gets a locked in spot to the playoffs. Um, I forgot about that. So, and that's nice for the group of five schools too. Is that they're one of their teams is guaranteed a playoff spot. Um, but yeah, I mean Clemson I think is really the only team. I think they could get an upset over too because I'm not high on Clemson this year. I think they're a good team. I think they could sneak into the playoffs, but I don't think they're going to win the ACC. So it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, they very well could upset Clemson here and propel themselves into the ACC championship game. So moving on here, we got North Carolina now. UNC, they don't have Drake May, and I mean Drake May was fighting for his life last year. I mean he had no offensive line. They still don't have an offensive line. They got the win total here set at 7.5. The odds are very very even on this. It's minus 115 to the over and minus 105 to the under. So they're favoring that over, but just barely. So that tells me that they're probably going to hit 7 wins this year, just based on what Vegas thinks, anyways. And yeah, UNC, like I said, they don't have an offensive line, and now they don't have Drake May, who was the heart and soul of that offense last year, who was the reason why they went 8-4 last year. And this team has regressed, but the schedule's pretty favorable. The only, they play NC State and Florida State. Those are the only two teams that they play that are ranked. Everything else is garbage teams in their in their conference, and then they play Minnesota, who's ass, and that's gonna be kind of a toss-up game. And everything else is garbage group of five schools. So I think, yeah, 7 wins, 8 wins maybe again, but again, with this offense, we don't really know anything.
Yeah, I think I would agree with Vegas on this one. I'm slight leaning to that over. I think they can get 7 wins, but like I will say I think they might lose to Minnesota because that game is in Minnesota.
That's true, but that is week one, so that's where it's like, okay, well, they don't have to play in any cold weather. So that kind of doesn't. There's no factor into that at least. But yeah, that is a toss-up game, and well, Vegas has it set at 7.5, so the under would be hitting there, but it's possible for 8 wins too, but I do not see more than 8. And it's just because that team isn't necessarily good, and they're not playing a lot of good teams, but you can lose a lot of games against bad teams if you're not a good team. So yeah, it's going to be a very interesting year for North Carolina for sure. Pittsburgh, 5.5 for Pitt is the win total, and Vegas heavily favors that under here, and I kind of agree with it. I can see 6 wins though, but it's going to be a tough season for Pitt, and they aren't good. They aren't what they were, 5 or 6 years ago. When was that game when we went to it was Eastern versus Pitt and Mike Glass punched a ref?
God, was it 2018 or
2018 or
2019?
2019, somewhere around
It was one of
those
those years. Yeah, he like punched on the ref and like spit on another player. That was really funny.
Oh, that was a great bowl game. That was a great bowl
What a
game.
game.
Man, Eastern should have won that game too. That's the crazy part. But no, I mean, it's gonna be a very interesting year for Pitt, and it's gonna be tough. Not in like the terms of the schedule, because I mean they don't play any of the currently ranked teams. And oh no, they do. They play
Play
Clemson,
Clemson.
and they also play Louisville, and so that's where I think the over is probably going to hit, because they also play Cincinnati, and now Cincinnati, we'll get to them on next Tuesday, but I feel like Cincinnati's definitely going to beat Pitt there. I mean, Cincinnati's not what they were a few years ago when everyone was like, oh, Cincinnati needs to make the playoffs, when they were still a Group of Five school. They moved to the Big 12 and kind of got shat on. So, but Cincinnati is still a pretty decent program right now. So I think that's probably going to be a loss there. And then everything else is just kind of a whole bunch of mid teams. So very easily can go hit that over. But they have the under in Vegas heavily favored. But I would hammer this over personally.
Yeah, I could see the overhitting, just depending on if a bunch of players decide to overperform and they do end up, having, a positive season, whether that be, a 500 at 6-6 or, 7-5. I don't really see, anything ridiculous. Like they're not hitting double-digit wins by any means, but I'd probably be more comfortable hitting that over.
Yeah, I feel like it is the not favored part on terms of Vegas, but I mean they play so many crap teams and mid-level teams that's like they could go 6-6 this year. Like it's not out of the realm of possibility for them at all. So moving on here now to SMU, another new addition to the ACC that's nowhere near the Atlantic coast because Dallas. But they got them here favored at 8.5. I mean, they were a solid program in the American Conference. Now they're moving up to Power Five football, and we've seen teams go from Group of Five to Power Five, or well, Power Four now. We've seen that transition. I mean, look at Cincinnati, look at UCF, both getting absolutely dunked on now, right? So uh, they have them, under on that 8.5. That's favored. They don't have an incredibly tough schedule, but again, can they play, Power Five football? Can they do that? That's going to be the big question here for SMU, and we don't know. And that's why I'm like I'm leaning towards hitting that under. I but the schedule's favorable for them, so that's why I'm like they'll probably be bowl eligible at the very very least this year. But I just don't see them hitting 8 wins personally. I think maybe 7, 8. I mean, you'd have to have a really tight toss up that they end up somehow winning. Outside of that, though, I 8, anything more than 8 is just out the window.
Yeah, I think 8 is like the absolute like peak conditions. Like that is their absolute maximum win total. And if they end up surprising me, good for them. But like that, ultimately, you said it though. The question is, can they play Power Five ball? And it's different from say some of these other teams that are just migrating from another conference. They've been playing Power Five ball, so they're already more adjusted. Granted, it's Pac-12, so we all know the Pac-12 after dark. We're all well aware of all of the lack of
Right,
defense that
right.
or doesn't exist out there.
Looking at
So
you, USC.
so it's granted they're going to they came to the ACC. They have teams that can compete and normally aren't playoff viable, but with the extended playoffs, they might sneak in. SMU isn't going to be one of those teams, I don't think.
No, they definitely won't. And you know, yeah, it's just a matter of can they play consistent Power Five football, and that's the big question mark. And like I said, we've seen teams come up from the group of five schools into Power Five and just not do good. So it is what it is, but I think that 8.5 is a very interesting number, but I just don't see that over going. I really don't. Stanford up next, another California school in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Obviously, coming over from the Pac-12 that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, it still does technically, but it's literally two schools. So, yeah. Anyways, Stanford 3.5. Vegas has that over heavily favored at -170. I feel like Stanford, obviously, their program is not nearly what it was when Jim Harbaugh was there. Obviously, when Harbaugh was there, I mean, that team was really, really good. And kind of since then, it's been nothing but shambles. And that's why as a Michigan fan, that kind of worries me just a little bit. But I think Michigan's going to be just fine. But it's a fairly tough schedule for Stanford. I mean, Notre Dame, Clemson, NC State, and TCU in week one. You know, those are 4 losses, I think. I mean, TCU, and we'll get to them next Tuesday on when we do the Big 12 preview. It's going to be a very, very interesting season for Stanford. I just don't see how they really go, more than 5 wins this year. I think they'll definitely hit that over on that 3.5. I think that's very a disingenuous number. I mean, yes, we know the state of the program is not good, but I feel like they could, at the very, very least, get 4 wins. But I can see 5 wins on that schedule. It's not a very tough schedule outside of those few ranked teams plus TCU.
Yeah, I think I'm comfortable hitting the over, but not by like many games. It's like maybe a game and a half at most.
Yeah, I mean it's 3.5. I see at the very least 4 wins, but I can see 5 wins on that schedule. I mean it is not a tough schedule by any means, but again that's just kind of the state of the ACC as well. It's not a tough conference to play in right now. So, anyways, Syracuse here 7.5 wins is that win total. The under is favored at -142. Syracuse is kind of just been one of those teams over the last few years that has just been pretty mid. They haven't had a hard schedule really at all, and they haven't had a easy schedule at all either. They've always sat right around 7-8 wins every single year the last 3-4 years now. So, I can see maybe 8 wins here. But they play 2 of the currently ranked or the preseason ranked teams, which is NC State and Miami at the end of the season. I mean it is a very easy schedule looking at it right now. I mean I could see that over hitting pretty well just based on the strength of schedule. But this program is not in the greatest shape either.
Yeah, I definitely see like 8-4 would be a good place to put Syracuse. I'm not really like again, I don't really know about like ACC teams in general, but like you said, they're normally a team that sits around in that bowl eligible area. So with the schedule with only 2 currently ranked teams, and looking at some of these teams that they have in this schedule, they should be bowl eligible at the very minimum.
Yeah, I don't see anything less than 6 losses or anything more than 6 losses on that schedule. And the ACC is not a strong conference at all. So I think if you're a Syracuse fan, a successful season is 8-4. I think that is the bare minimum for you as a Syracuse fan. And if you think just being 6-6 is a successful season, in with what you do have in terms of talent on your team and where the ACC is at as a whole, if you think 6-6 is a good season, I got news for you, man. Because it's not in the current state. Looking at Syracuse and their schedule. So Virginia up next, -110 to both the over and the under here. 4.5 wins. Virginia, one of those teams that used to be really, really good back in the good old days of college football. Not really anymore, and not for quite a long time either. It's been quite quite a while since they've been good, and they've always kind of just been that 4 or 5 win team. I mean, yes, there was a few years ago where they had a winning record, but they haven't had a winning record since that blip on the with a winning record. I can see the over going here. I mean, it can go really either way with that on that 4.5 line. I mean, you can see him going 4 wins. You can see him going 6 wins. So I mean, it's just kind of how it is with Virginia. They're just not in a good state as in terms of just where their program's at, and I don't know how you would rebuild Virginia either. But yeah, 4.5 here. I could see them probably going 5-7 though. I mean, I just don't think they're going to be bowl eligible this year.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it, they were not good last year in 2023. So they went 3-9. So I mean, they did upset North Carolina when they were number 10 for one of their 3 wins. But again, they went 3-9.
Yeah.
This year, I don't know if they're going to be that much better. But, I could say they're probably better than 3 wins.
Yeah, I would say they're probably better than 3 wins, but not a whole lot much more than that. Virginia Tech is up next here. 8.5 is that win total. Minus 152 to that under though, so Vegas likes the under here. Virginia Tech is one of those teams where they used to be good a long time ago. They kind of just were shit for a while, then they were kind of mid, and then they were shit, and then they're mid. They're on the up and up right now. 8.5 wins. I believe they went last year 7-5. I'd have to look, or if you could pull that up. But I like this team. I mean, obviously, I think they have one of the best intros in college football with the Enter Sandman, coming out to start the game. So that's always exciting, of course. And they have a very favorable schedule this year. The only currently ranked team that they play is Miami. They play Vanderbilt to start the year, who's god awful, and then they play a couple, shitty teams like Marshall and Old Dominion, and they can start the year off 4-0 before they go and play Miami, and I think Miami will beat them. I like the over for Virginia Tech this year. I really, really do. I mean, obviously Vegas doesn't like that over, but I can see 9 wins out of this team this year. They are on the up and up as a program. Over the last couple of years, they've gotten better. And so, yeah, I like them. I mean, they're not going to, go out and compete with Miami and Clemson and Florida State, but I could very easily see, 9 wins out of them just based on their schedule.
Yeah, basing off schedule, like you said, I can see those 9 wins, and yeah, they went 7-6 last year with a bowl loss. So I mean, granted, that's not bad.
No, and that's not bad at all.
But yeah, like you said, with the schedule, I can see room for improvement, and they have comfortability in there, and I don't know if they're going to be NC State level of challenging for the ACC crown just yet, but who knows? They could surprise and then end up, if they upset Clemson or they upset Miami, and then they are in that running. So, it is
right.
possible.
It is.
It is a stretch, I would say. So I'm comfortable taking the over there, but again, it's one of those where it'd be like a game at most.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's 8.5. I don't see them, going 10-2. But 9-3, I think, is very plausible for this program. That is on the up and up. I mean, again, they aren't world beaters right now. They could be in a couple years. They could be back to that good Virginia Tech teams that we've seen in the past. But I mean, obviously, it's been a very long time since we've seen those teams. I mean, a lot of people alive today haven't even seen those good teams. So, but yeah, it's. The program's heading in the right direction for Virginia Tech, and you love to see it. Especially because they've had so much, they've been shat on the last couple decades really.
It's been since good old Michael Vick, huh?
Yeah, it's literally been since Michael Vick since they were good. So I mean, like, it's nice to see a team like that finally back up in terms of just having winning seasons. And maybe this is the year where they really take a step forward. But right now, the program's heading in the right direction, and you can't say anything better than that. And so yeah, so last but not least in this conference, not in this episode, we have Wake Forest. They have Vegas has the win total set at 4.5. The over's favored at -152, and I can see it happening. Just looking at the schedule, there's quite a few toss-ups for them, but I can see 5 wins, no problem here. Really on this, for this Wake Forest team. I mean, they weren't what they were, 4 or 5 years ago now, but you know, they're definitely worse off, but they're not, the bottom of their conference right now. I mean, obviously, Stanford is right there, and but Wake Forest I think can pull off at least 5 wins. I mean, this schedule is not the most favorable. I mean, they play Ole Miss in week 3. That's going to be a loss for sure. And then they play NC State, Clemson, and Miami at some point. But everything else, though, mostly toss-ups here. I mean, Duke's probably going to be a toss-up. North Carolina's probably going to be a loss. Cal's a toss-up. UConn's probably a win for them. And then, yeah, it's Wake Forest. I think we could see them bowl eligible this year, honestly. I like that over on 4.5. I mean, I can see 5 wins at the bare minimum here. I don't see how they lose, 8 games just based off of schedule. I mean, on paper it says one thing. In practice, obviously, it's a completely different thing, and that's what we're doing here. We're just basing our opinions on paper, not what we've seen so far, because we haven't seen anything.
Yeah, I think I am very comfortable taking the over there because I think 5 wins, 5 to 7 is definitely doable for this team.
Yeah, and again, this is just based on what the schedule looks like, and it a lot of toss-ups there, obviously, but that's just the way the ACC really is this year. Is a lot of these games are going to be toss-ups because most of these schools are very just mid teams, and there's obviously a few ass ones in the conference, but there's a lot of mid ones as well. So, yeah, it's just it's gonna be very, very interesting for sure to see what happens with the ACC this year. But I think it shouldn't be a terrible season um, for Wake Forest, but it's not going to be a good one. So yeah, so now we're going to go on here to Notre Dame because they do play 5 ACC schools this year, and they usually play around 5 or 6 ACC schools. Now that they have this deal with the ACC to play X amount of games with against ACC opponents. Too bad they chickened out of playing against Big Ten schools like Michigan and Michigan State and Penn State. But it is what it is. Last time they played Michigan, they got absolutely smoked by a not so good Michigan team. So, anyways, Notre Dame, their win total here is at 10.5. Vegas has that favored on the under at -176, and even before seeing this win total, I would have said Notre Dame's probably gonna go 10-2 this year, and they'll make the playoffs. And the schedule would kind of agree with me there. They don't play a super tough schedule. Obviously, all the ACC schools that they play are not that good. So yeah, I mean, so they start obviously the year with Texas A&M, and that's going to be a toss-up, I think. And then yeah, just a whole bunch of crap teams up until really they play Florida State later on in the year, and then they go and play USC at the end of the year. And USC I think could be a toss-up just because we don't know what USC is. If USC's ass, I mean, I'm gonna say yeah, Notre Dame's gonna win that game, but Notre Dame should be good this year, regardless. They have a lot of talent, and so yeah, I think 10 wins at the bare minimum for Notre Dame here. Vegas says that it's probably going to be 10 wins, and I don't base my opinions off of what they say, but you know, I would not put Notre Dame going more than 10 wins this year.
Yeah, I'm thinking 9-3, 10-2 is a pretty good range for Notre Dame. Because, like you said, there's a lot of teams outside of Texas A&M, Florida State, and possibly USC. It's just a bunch of mid, and who knows? Maybe Louisville will surprise us and upset them. But like,
Yeah,
I think 9-3, 10-2 is safe bet.
yeah, I would definitely say so. Like 9-3 at the bare minimum, but yeah, I mean that's counting on USC actually surprising us really. I think this year, and Texas A&M in a toss-up game getting that win as well. Again, it is down in College Station though, so uh, and I believe Texas A&M is the underdog for that game. Yet they are.
Yep. 41.2%.
Yeah, 41.2%, and the line is actually Texas A&M favored by 2. So that's interesting. Um, but yeah, um, that's gonna do it though for us today. Next Tuesday we're gonna do the Big 12. We'll get into that, or well, Big 16 now. But anyways, um, yeah, Big 12 obviously, and then next week Thursday we're gonna preview. Really, we'll preview week 0/week 1. Because I mean, again, there's only one actual important game in week 0, and that's Clemson, Georgia. Everything else is a whole bunch of shitty teams that no one really cares about. So, but then we'll get into to the week 1 stuff probably the week after then, because I really don't feel like going over everything a week in advance. But we'll figure that out. But guys, again, 9 days away from college football. 9 days. Can you believe it? And that is um, 15, no, 16 games or 16 days from NFL football. No, no. 14 days because of Thursday night football to start off the year for the NFL. So, yeah, with that said, rate, review, subscribe, help us out. Let us know what you want to see more of course. Check out our YouTube page. Keep sharing the podcast. We'll keep growing this thing, guys. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we will see you guys on Tuesday.